The 10,000-foot runway at Point Salines Airport had been secured for hours. It was the afternoon of October 25, 1983, and the Rangers of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, had fought all morning to get to this moment. They had jumped before dawn at 500 feet, the lowest combat jump since World War II, landed on a blocked runway under anti-aircraft fire, cleared Cuban construction workers at gunpoint, and held the airhead long enough for the first 82nd Airborne transports to start rolling in at 2 in the afternoon. The hard part was supposed to be over. Then, at 3:30, someone called it armor. 3 BTR-60 armored personnel carriers from the Grenadian Army's motorized company were driving south from the north end of the perimeter, straight into the Ranger positions. Their 14.5mm heavy machine guns were already working. Against infantry with rifles and machine guns, a BTR-60 is not a vehicle to engage. It is a problem to solve before it closes to a range where the guns make everything else irrelevant. A Ranger crew swings a 90mm recoilless rifle into position, a weapon that the Pentagon had officially decided was obsolete, a weapon that procurement had tried to replace, then tried to retire, then tried to replace again. A weapon that weighed 37 pounds unloaded and generated a backblast that could kill a man standing directly behind it. The gunner acquires the lead BTR through his scope. He fires. That weapon was the M67, and the reason it was still on that airfield, still in Ranger weapons platoons, still in the hands of allies across 3 continents, is not a story about tradition or inertia. It is a story about what happens when an army mistakes sophistication for competence, and what happens when the technology it trusted most goes cold. The thinking behind replacing the M67 was not foolish. It was, in fact, exactly correct, for the war planners expected to fight. By the mid-1970s, Soviet tank doctrine had produced a force of armored vehicles that dwarfed anything American infantry had faced in Korea or Vietnam. The T-64, the T-72, these were not the aluminum-hulled light armor of Southeast Asia. They were main battle tanks with composite armor designed specifically to defeat the shaped charge warheads that had dominated anti-tank weapons since World War II. A 90mm recoilless rifle firing a heat round was not going to stop a T-72. Everyone in the Army knew it. So procurement made a rational decision. Replace the M67 with a guided missile system that could track, correct, and deliver a more capable warhead at longer range. That system was the M47 Dragon. The Dragon represented a genuine leap in thinking. Wire-guided, semi-automatic command to line of sight, it could engage armor at ranges the M67 could not match. And its warhead could penetrate over 300 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor. Against the Soviet armored columns that were expected to pour through the Fulda Gap, it was the right tool. The procurement logic was sound. The threat model was coherent. The Dragon entered service in 1975. And the M67 began its managed obsolescence. By the end of the decade, most line infantry units had transitioned. The recoilless rifle was officially done. Except the Dragon had a problem that nobody in a procurement office fully reckoned with. The missile's thermal battery, the power source that drove its guidance electronics, required a minimum operating temperature to function. In extreme Arctic cold, commanders and unit leaders raised persisting concerns that those batteries could fail without warning in the field. And the Dragon was not the only system with this problem. The TOW missile's guidance wires and electronics were similarly vulnerable in temperature extremes. The guided missile revolution that was supposed to solve the anti-armor problem had built itself on electronic components that assumed a temperate battlefield. The M67 had no electronics. It had a rifled steel barrel, a breech, a trigger, and physics. In -40-degree weather in Alaska, it still fired. The Army had made the right call for the war it expected to fight. That is, the specific way these decisions go sideways. the 6th Light Infantry Division was stationed in Alaska. Their job was Arctic warfare, defending the northern approaches, operating in terrain and temperatures that made most of the Army's standard equipment unreliable. When the M47 Dragon arrived to replace the M67, commanders remained concerned that Dragon batteries and tow guidance components could be vulnerable in extreme cold. A weapon that could not be counted on to function when the temperature dropped was not a weapon. It was equipment that created a false sense of security, which is worse than having nothing, because a soldier who thinks he has anti-armor capability and discovers he doesn't, finds that out at the worst possible moment. The M67 stayed in use in Alaska as a simpler fallback. As of 1988, the 6th Division's Special Weapons platoons were still carrying it. That decision extended beyond Alaska. What the M67 offered in exchange for its weight and backblast was a kind of honesty. It was not a precision system. It was a direct-fire weapon built on a principle that had not changed since World War II. Vent the propellant gas rearward, and the projectile goes forward with no recoil to manage. That simplicity was also its immunity. No guidance package to freeze, no battery to fail, no wire to tangle or snap. The gunner needed a working eye, a functioning trigger, and a round in the breech. The M67 weighed 37 pounds empty and carried 3 basic ammunition types: the M371A1 heat round for armor and fortifications, the M590 anti-personnel round loaded with 2,400 steel flechettes, and a practice round for zeroing. That anti-personnel round was capable of devastating an exposed infantry formation at close range. In Vietnam, against NVA troop concentrations and fortified positions, American units used the M590 far more often than the heat round. The weapon that had been procured as an anti-tank rifle became, in practice, an anti-personnel weapon with an anti-armor secondary capability. That versatility was not planned. It was discovered in combat, and it became one more reason the Army couldn't walk away from it. The Berlin Brigade, American infantry garrisoning West Berlin throughout the Cold War, also retained the M67 in its weapons platoons until winter 1991, when the Dragon finally replaced it in January 1992. Berlin's threat was not the open-field tank engagement the Dragon was designed for. It was close quarters urban combat in streets and corridors and stairwells. The kind of environment where, in principle, the Dragon's minimum arming distance and its requirement to hold the target in sight for the missile's entire flight time would create serious tactical problems. The M67 fired a round. The round went where it was aimed. In an alley, that was everything. So the M67 lived on. Not from sentiment, not from bureaucratic inertia, but because the systems that were supposed to replace it kept revealing scenarios where they couldn't perform. Every time the Army tried to close the door on the M67, reality opened it back up. The BTR 60PB is a Soviet-designed 8-wheeled armored personnel carrier. Its turret carries a 14.5mm KPVT heavy machine gun and a coaxial 7.62mm PKT. Its armor is 9mm on the hull front. It is not a tank. It is not designed to stop shape-charge munitions. What it is designed to do is provide mobile firepower that infantry cannot stop with small arms, and against Rangers holding a contested airfield with their flanks still being organized, that is more than enough. 3 BTR-60s had moved on the Ranger positions at 3:30 in the afternoon. Alpha Company had rifles, M60 machine guns, M72 Law rockets, M47 Dragon launchers, and a 90mm recoilless rifle team. The Law was a one-shot disposable rocket with a small warhead and a range that required closing dangerously near an armored vehicle whose machine gun could reach out 400 yards. The Dragon required the gunner to acquire the target, launch, and then hold perfectly still while the missile flew toward the vehicle, tracking a moving target in smoke and noise with 14.5mm rounds impacting around the firing position for 10 to 12 seconds. The M67 crew set up and acquired the lead BTR through the 3-power optical sight. The stadia lines in the reticle bracketed the vehicle at range. He fired. The 90mm heat round covered the distance in moments. It struck the lead BTR in the turret mantlet. The vehicle stopped. The second BTR drove into its rear, a collision that took both of them out of the fight. The third attempted to withdraw and was caught by an AC-130 gunship orbiting overhead. All three vehicles destroyed, the counterattack broken, the airhead secure. The Dragon launchers were present at Point Salines. There is no documented record of the Dragon scoring kills during that armored engagement. The weapon that performed when it mattered was the one that did not require batteries, guidance wires, or a 10-second tracking window. It required a trained gunner, a clear line of sight, and 90mm of shaped charge. The People's Revolutionary Army and their Cuban advisors had built their defense of Grenada around Soviet doctrine. BTR-60s provided mobile armored support. Anti-aircraft guns covered the airstrip. The assumption was that any American force would be vulnerable while consolidating an airhead. Disorganized, still building defensive positions, without heavy weapons readily deployed, unable to stop armored vehicles with small arms alone. That assumption was reasonable. It was built on a correct reading of what infantry looks like in the hours after a contested airborne assault, when men are spread out and the perimeter is not yet solid. What the doctrine did not account for was a weapon that was mechanically simple enough to be ready in those early hours. The M67 broke down to components small enough to jump with. It needed no external power source, no warm-up, no arming delay, no battery check, no minimum arming distance. Its gunner needed line of sight and a target inside 300 meters. Against vehicles moving in a direct line across open ground, those requirements were easy to meet. The Grenadian commanders had planned around the capabilities of the American infantry they expected. They did not plan around a 1959 vintage recoilless rifle that the United States Army had officially decided to retire. After Grenada, the Army Rangers did not immediately replace the M67. They kept it. They kept it through the rest of the 1980s. They kept it through Panama in 1989, where C Company of the 193rd Infantry Brigade used M67s firing anti-personnel flechette rounds in urban combat during Operation Just Cause. The transition to the Carl Gustaf came gradually. By the early 1990s, the Swedish-designed recoilless rifle had replaced the M67 in Ranger weapons platoons. Not a guided missile, a recoilless rifle with a larger caliber and a broader ammunition selection, but the same fundamental principle. Propellant gas vents rearward, the round goes forward, no batteries required. The Rangers had spent years carrying a weapon the Army called obsolete, and when they finally set it down, they picked up something built on the same physics. The Allies who still field M67s, South Korea, where Kia Motors manufactured licensed versions and Poom Sam produced ammunition, Greece, which built the M67 variant, the nations that received American military assistance in the 1970s and 1980s did not keep the weapon out of poverty or inability to modernize. They kept it because the M67 fills a gap that guided missiles still leave. In urban terrain, in extreme cold, in scenarios where a soldier needs to stop something armored right now without a tracking window and a battery check, the recoilless rifle answers a question that sophisticated systems still sometimes cannot. The Army reissued M67s to the 101st Airborne Division's 4th Brigade Combat Team in Afghanistan in 2011. The Javelin missile cost over $70,000 per round. The M67's 90mm heat round cost a fraction of that, and it did not require the gunner to remain stationary while it flew. Against mud brick compounds and fortified personnel positions in Paktika Province, the old gun performed exactly as it had on an airstrip in the Caribbean 28 years earlier. What the M67 teaches, what every ally who kept it in service already knew, is that technology does not replace fundamentals. It supplements them, until the conditions change. The Army spent 20 years trying to retire a weapon because the weapon meant to replace it was smarter. In the Arctic, the smart weapon froze. In the alley, the smart weapon needed room to arm. At Point Salines, The smart weapon needed 10 seconds the armored counterattack would not provide. The dark reason the M67 is still in service with some allies is not that they lack options. It is that they understand something about the nature of close-quarters lethality that procurement offices tend to forget. A round that leaves the barrel and goes where it is aimed is not a primitive solution. In the right environment, in the cold, in the city, at 300 meters when the clock is running, it is the only solution. If this channel is where you go to understand why the weapons that mattered actually mattered, and why some of them never really went away, subscribe. This story keeps going.